Hey everybody, how you doing? Once again, my name is Brian. I am uh, here with the Live Life Now podcast, and today's episode is about what it's like recording and releasing an album, and how the music industry's changed. Obviously, there's a lot to go into there, and I won't be able to cover everything, but I'll just say this: I'm going to speak from my personal experiences. There are many different ways that things can happen, especially nowadays. And, you know, there's no perfect way to do it or not do it, I guess. But at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you my version of what happened and how it worked. Okay, so for those that have seen previous episodes or that know me personally, you will know that I have been in multiple bands. I was first with a band called Overboard. Bored as in boredom. And we were based out of Miami. We played many shows. We recorded a live demo, which is basically just, it was not a good recording. It was just to try to get the songs down. But then we did a proper demo towards the end of the band where we recorded down our favorite songs and try to put something together that sounded good. So we could try to, in theory, use it to book shows. This was in 2002 and 2003. It worked a little differently than it does nowadays, and it worked a little differently than it did back in the day, too, at that time. By 2002, 2003, the internet obviously had taken over, so a lot of things were online, but a lot of things were also, you had to go through websites, and you had to go one by one to get contacts like emails and phone numbers and stuff, where now you might just be able to Google things a lot easier and get more to the point and get your contacts faster. So just saying that to kind of give you a little backstory. My next band, Cerebrus, happened. We definitely worked on songs and recorded some demo stuff. It was kind of an incomplete demo of sorts, and we demoed up a bunch of ideas that weren't ultimately the band. They were more like my ideas, and me trying to record down new ideas to form new songs all the time based off of whatever I felt like in that moment or in that day, listening to a lot of music, and then just trying to play something that I came up with on the spot that was inspired by the music I was just listening to. My next band, Scapegoat and Sinphemy, was a 4-year project. That was already by 2008 to 2012. We went through 3 official drummer changes. We also jammed with another drummer briefly. It was a process. Once again, demos. We went by the time that we really by the time the Scapegoat part was ending, we went back and recorded all the songs that we had. We got up to 27 songs that we had all before the band ended. So it was a lot. That being said, the large majority of all the recordings I did with those bands were home demos. The only non-home demos that I did were with Overboard. I was going to college at the time of Overboard, and I was studying sound engineering at that moment. I later ended up switching to music business, and then had difficulty, not with the classes or anything. I liked all of that, but difficulty when I went to finish up the bachelor's to go to another school that continued those programs. They didn't have them at the second school I went to, so I had to switch careers. I had to switch majors because the music part was not available unless you were, performing music, usually more of like a like classical music or orchestra or something. Anyways, going off on a tangent to say that my recording studio experience was fairly limited because I had mainly done projects at my college in their recording studios, and I got to see it change over the years. We started off, my original projects were with analog tapes, which was on its way out by the early 2000s. Later went digital. The updated recording studio was a digital-based recording studio, and so I got to see both sides of it, which is kind of neat. And then, once home recording got better and better, I mainly went that route. And typically that was okay, at least for a demo. I mean, we weren't making money at doing this stuff. Typically, we often played for free. So why would we want to spend thousands of dollars in a recording studio when honestly, a lot of the members didn't have all that much money available to begin with to do stuff like that. The only times that we really, used like actually made money were only on a handful of gigs. And even then, it was extremely rare. You were much more likely to get maybe free beer or free sodas or waters or maybe a little bit of food if they offered it. It was rare that you would get actual money. I could count probably a handful of shows that I ever got paid from, unfortunately, like in a real, financial sense. But anyways, the reason I'm going through all of that is to explain that I didn't have like a lengthy recording studio process that wasn't like a home demo or a live recording in a venue or something, or just like a one-off song in my university until I recorded my solo album, Full Circle. I recorded that in late 2014, early 2015. And that was, I had a lot of experience doing the home recording and had some experience doing the music studio recording, and I'd in the rehearsal studios and jam. So I felt pretty confident. I knew how to record music. What made that one difficult was that I recorded all the instruments myself, and I did all the vocals, and all the songs were my original songs. So it was 100% me, and I had to be on my game because every moment counts. When you're in a studio, you're getting charged by the hour, and it adds up real quick. There's numerous ways they can do it. Sometimes they'll give you like a block of time, and you can just accomplish whatever you can. Usually they break it up into 3 sections. It's usually you have your basically lay down your basic tracks. Usually start with like drums, guitar, bass, and vocals often are last. But it can be done many different ways. There's not one specific way it has to be done, but typically you want to get down your drums first. That's often the way that it's done. Reason being that it kind of sets the backbone of the song, and it's much harder to record the drums after the fact when maybe you're out of, if you don't have like a click track, which is basically like a standard steady beat that's set, that stays in one time signature, like it stays in one beats per minute. It's very easy to speed up or slow down when you're playing guitar if you don't have something to play along to. So long story short, you do the drums first because if a guitar player is playing, right, they're playing the song, even if they played it a million times, they may speed up at moments, they may slow down at moments, and it's really hard to match the drums over a recording where you have to learn, oh, this part sped up a little bit. Oh, I gotta get a little faster. It's much better to try to get a steady beat with the drums. And if you do slightly speed up or slow down, it's much easier to switch the guitar portion of it to change the little difference in beats per minute. Anyways, that's just a little behind the scenes of how recording works. But when I did my solo album, there were numerous options out there. The way I found my studio, I wasn't in college anymore, so that really wasn't an option anymore. At the time, there was a site that basically said, put in a bid with all of these local recording studios, and they will get back in touch with you, the ones that are interested in what you want to do. So I remember it was probably like 10 to 12 studios that were listed on this list. I put in my thing and whatever information they wanted. 2 studios got back to me. One was a very professional recording studio in Miami. They seemed very top of the line with a lot of stuff. It seemed like a place where like, this is probably where your real professional, like signed recording acts had recorded in the past. So it's very exciting. It was like the idea of playing in a place where, professional musicians that have toured all around the world have recorded their songs and albums was a very, enticing offer. But it wasn't going to be cheap. And at the time I had a drum set, but it was my father's drum set. And I didn't know if I was going to be a good enough drummer to make things happen. And I also didn't know, I wanted to have like the best sounding drums I could. And I was unsure that the drum set that I had, which was my father's drum set from the 1970s and basically hadn't been updated ever since, I was a little concerned that it might not be the best option to record my album with, especially with me as, not a non-professional drummer. So I asked them if I could borrow a drum, like if they had drums that I could use for my recordings. Those were all going to be extra expenses. And but I still seriously considered it because it sounded like an awesome opportunity. The next option was definitely the more cost-effective option. But it was basically a guy who had, he had went to college at my same college, taken probably the same or similar classes that I had taken when I was in college. And either him or his parents or somebody had the money to build their own home studio. And this was not like some little, side project for him. He took it real seriously. He had top of the line equipment. I asked him, I remember asking, this was once again 2014. I asked him, like, how much money did all this equipment cost? I mean, tons of amps and microphones and speakers and, mixing boards and, everything you could possibly think of were there. I was there. And I remember them saying, him and his friend saying, this cost about $250,000 for this equipment. So it was really good. I couldn't complain. The things that were probably slightly more concerning were that I didn't know how experienced this person was. They were a student that went to college and were now recording people out of their home studio. So I didn't know, like, are they good enough to even be recording this? Like, do they, have the experience to make this happen? And then also, some of their setups for certain things were kind of odd. Like, typically you have like a soundproof recording booth for the vocals. They basically had a closet that they had put a bunch of foam all over the walls. And, it wasn't your professional recording studio for certain parts of the process. But they told me, hey, I could use their drums at no extra charge, just bring the cymbals. And they seemed pretty laid back. It was significantly less expensive. So I ultimately went with that option. So I recorded my album Full Circle in South Florida. It was broken up in a couple sections. The first day I was just doing all the drums. And then it moved into, I was doing a full 12 songs. So I had to be really well prepared. I initially, before I went that route, I had tried to record the songs at my house and record them myself without anybody helping me. But it got really tough because as somebody that, has played drums, but, I played snare drum in middle school and I'd had drum sets around from my friends or from my father's drum set. But I wasn't somebody that actually like sat behind the kit and like really got to play all that much over the years. I was a guitarist. So it got real tough to get the song the way I would hear it in my head on drums to come out with a perfect drum take. So I remember trying to record things at my house. I would set up everything. I'd hit record. I'd get behind the drums. I would start playing. I would make mistakes. I would run back and forth. Eventually, I realized I'm going to have to just leave it running, and then I can edit out the stuff that isn't good later. But the stopping and starting and getting up and down was really just like wasting time, and I could just jump right into another try at it. But it got really tough because I'm trying to play the songs in my head the way I think they sound, but I'm not listening back to anything. I tried to do headphone types of things. It was just too complicated. I was like, you would hit them with the drumsticks so they'd start moving around on you and it would be distracting. So basically, After I had done a bunch of work trying to get the drums right and record everything in my house, I realized my room where I did all the playing, didn't have the proper sound, quality. Number one, I didn't have anything soundproofed. Even if I put things in front of things to try to help, it didn't do the job. But more importantly than that, it was really tough to get the levels right, because you're hitting the drums so hard, and to not peak the recording equipment was tough, especially when while I had some recording experiences, I had done a lot of the home recording stuff. I was no expert at this stuff. I didn't know how to get the levels the right way without certain things sounding too loud. I did have all the mics and equipment needed to do it, but not the experience or the training to do it. Even though I had studied some sound engineering and I had been part of recording studios and I had helped, other people with their projects, and ultimately helped on my own a lot for my stuff, like with my bands and things. It didn't make me a full expert and know how to do it completely by myself. So what I learned was I needed help. I needed somebody that did it better than me and knew what they were doing better than me. That wasn't me trying to, produce my own music while also playing the music at the same moment. The good news of what came out. Oh, there was one last part. So I was just going to roll with it anyway. I was going to just make it happen and just assume well, I'll do the best I can with the drums and everything else. I'll figure it out. My computer crashed. I remember that once it crashed, I basically lost access to all the recordings I had done. Hours and hours of trying to get the drums just right. Basically gone. I had, the hard drive. I could try to do things to recover it. Even if I did, it was just a sign that, hey, this is not meant to be. So that after the home recordings failed, there was one really positive thing out of it. And it was that I had taken the time to rehearse and practice the drum parts for all of my songs over and over and over again. So I knew exactly what I wanted to play on every part of every song that I wanted to record for my album. So this, even though it didn't work out and I ended up having to go to a studio to help me out, it was the rehearsal I needed to get my drum parts correct, so that I didn't want to go into the studio unprepared. I obviously knew the lyrics. I had the guitar parts. I knew what I wanted to do vocally with singing it. But I didn't want to improv the drums. The drums to me are always like the backbone of the recordings. And I felt like if I'm going to spend all this money, I want it to be the best possible. I had looked into possibly having one of my old drummers from one of my bands come on the recording and play. But the person I asked was out of town the weekend I was going to record. And I didn't want to reschedule my recording times because I was going to be traveling the world in the near future, and I didn't want to delay things and potentially not have the recordings done before I left for the trip. And the recordings themselves I knew would be done, but it's not just recording, because you have the basic tracks, you have overdubs, which are basically you're adding on all the other layers of the song. Then you have vocals, and then once you get all the recording stuff down right, you have mixing, which is basically getting your levels right, getting it where you want. And then there's mastering, which is basically putting the final touches on everything, giving it like for lack of a better word, like a glossy sound or whatever type of sound you're looking for. You kind of gives a uniform sound to the entire album. And what I was doing was very adventurous because I was recording a lot of songs in a very short window of time. I was not used to playing the drums all the time. I was not the vocalist in any of my bands in the past. I was usually the backup vocalist, and I was usually the main songwriter and everything else, but I was not the lead vocalist. And, and a lot of times I was also the rhythm guitar player and not the lead guitar player. And I was doing rhythm, lead, bass, vocals, backup vocals, and all the drum and percussion stuff. So it was 100% a challenge, but I can still listen back to my album full circle and be happy that it came out pretty much 90% where I would have liked it to have been. I'll say this: there are moments that I wish I could have went back and fixed, or I was like, a little part here, or this whole part here. But there was two things about it that I'm okay with the way it is. Number one, I did the best I could given the time that I had, and I felt like the pressure of trying to have the perfect take on the first take. There's like a sense of like urgency in some of those recordings. I think it added something to the feel of the songs in some level. Number two, you know what? Even if I went back and fixed it and did everything right, it would have cost significantly more money, and it pretty much is pretty minor stuff. And for the most part, most of the times people wouldn't even notice the differences if I didn't point them out to them. I will say this: I was working at a body shop at the time, and I was putting in 12-hour days. And when it came time to do the vocals on a couple of the songs, I can hear the tiredness of working a 12-hour day and then going to record vocals for hours at a time at night. It was a lot of strain in my voice. So not perfectly ideal. And obviously it would have been great to have, maybe a weekend set aside where I could have just done vocals. But once again, I was using the time I had with the window of opportunity I had before I did my world travels. Anyways, so that's a quick gist of the recording process. Ultimately, I went and came up with a track list. I went through the recordings and figured out an order that I thought they sounded best from one to the next. I had my friend do all the artwork. I had a CD company. The CDs were still fairly popular at the time, not super, but more popular than now. There was a company out there that made the CDs for me. And so with the artwork and the music and the mixing and long story short, I was able to put together a full album. It was really exciting. I was able to hold it in my hands. I made 100 copies. They looked super professional. They had UPC symbols, like they could be properly scanned in a store and sold. When I went to do, I was planning on doing this world traveling, and I thought my real goal beyond just making the album is to have my album in stores. So I wouldn't go out to stores. I'd go out to more of your indie record stores and just show up and just be like, hey, I made an album. I'd like to stock it here. Will you stock it for me? And every store was a little different from the next. Some of them basically said no. Some of them were like, we don't really sell CDs anymore. Vinyl's the thing now. Some of them were like, well, you're an unknown. You can either give them, you can leave them here at the front, and we'll leave them on the front counter. And if somebody wants a free copy, they can take one, but we're not going to sell it. Or there were ones that were like, we can basically co-sign on them, like consignments, which basically means that if they sell, we will eventually pay you for the money that, we were going to take a cut. Let's say how much do you want to sell it for? If I said $10, okay, we are going to split it 50-50, and you'll make $5, we'll make $5. And just get in contact with us in a couple months, and we'll give you the money if you've made any. But if you don't make any, we need the shelf space. Basically, we're going to toss your album out. And so there was stuff like that. The best one I had is I came across a record store, and they were like, okay, we'll take some copies of your albums. Usually they would take about 5. Which I didn't want to give too many anyway. There was no guarantee people would buy them. Nobody knew who I was really. But they said, okay, give us a couple albums. How much do you sell them for? I give them a price. They go, okay, you've given me this many albums. You're selling them at this price. I explained that I'm traveling through, I'm not really going to be around town. So I won't be able to pick up money from them, in a consignment type of situation. So they said, okay, you got a store credit for this much money. That means go ahead and pick out some stuff that you want. And we'll use that as your, the credit towards the money that you would have made for selling your album, when people purchase them. So I was able to kind of get free CDs and stuff from some of the stores, from established artists, for selling mine there. That was the best case scenario. I also tried to sell them at shows, but that didn't go well. I often ended up handing a couple out to cool people I met, either bartenders that were really nice, or maybe people that were running the shows that had befriended me a bit, giving them copies of the album. I also gave the album out to some bands. I had seen the band Royal Blood, and after the show, I stuck around and I got to meet them, and I handed them my CD. So that was neat. Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins has a tea house in Highland Park, Illinois. I went to the first incarnation of his tea house, and there was like a pile of CDs there, and I asked the barista, like, hey, what's the deal with this? Like, you can leave your CD here and he might listen to them. And I was like, how often does he actually listen to them? And they'd be like, you'd be surprised. He listens to quite a few of these. So I was like, okay, cool. So I left a copy for him. I obviously don't know if he ever listened to it or not. And then I did a meet and greet with the rock band The Warning and gave them a copy of my CD. And they were very nice, especially their singer, Danny, who she basically said, oh, I will definitely make sure we listen to this. And thank you so much. I felt like one of the best gifts I could give to another musician is something that I'm proud of too, which was my music, sharing the gift of music. And obviously, a lot of these people are probably getting a million gifts and albums and everything else along the way. And I obviously have no idea if any of these artists listened to my album at the end of the day, but you don't know unless you try. I also wanted to have my songs on the radio. So I eventually reached out to an online streaming radio station and had my song Forgotten Life played on their radio station for a stretch. It was like a pay-to-play type of situation, which is very common. You would think that you wouldn't see that much nowadays because the artist should be the one getting paid, right? Well, I've had a couple situations over the years where to get on shows, or even when I performed on Miami Music Television that time, there was a $200 fee that had to be paid, or no, actually I think it was $400 off the top of my head. I think it was to get on the show. And these were, they would say these are production costs and everything else. And you didn't have to pay them, of course, but then you wouldn't be part of these things. And I figured it was a good opportunity to get on television, number one, but number two, to maybe somebody out there would see my music and like it, and who knows? You never know unless you try. So I, often gave into these things. And, do they have like huge results for me? No, but at the same time, I can always look back proudly and know that these were stepping stones and accomplishments of my music career, of my performing career, and of my recording career. So that's kind of a quick rundown of everything. Obviously, it's a lot of information I just gave, but nowadays technology has changed. A lot of people do home recordings, even professional artists. You can still go the normal route and do professional recording studios, and I think there is good and bad in all of it. Not just financially, but even just sound quality and things. But nowadays, it's much easier than it used to be. Equipment to record with is much more accessible for lower prices, and there's not so much of a gatekeeping as there was back in the day. But at the same time, there's so much out there. There's so much music that nobody, there's websites for things, but to find the artists that you're excited about, you might have to go through a lot of music to find something you're truly, happy to hear. Yeah, you can go to like your Spotify's and all these others, and they might make specialized playlists based on your, listening history or your search history or whatever. But you don't really know. There might be great artists out there that you'll never know about just because either number one, they didn't, use these platforms, or number two, they just didn't know how or didn't get that far into their process to actually get their music properly recorded. So anyways, that's a bit of a half an hour summation of my personal recording processes for my bands and solo projects, and also the process of releasing the album and selling it. I consider the album officially released once I got copies of the albums, of the CDs. So My official release date for Full Circle was February 1st, 2015. But that's it for now. If you want to listen to my music, you can listen to it on Reverb Nation under Sinphemy, Brian Peterson, and BDB, or Big Daddy B. It's under there. I also have a SoundCloud page, and I will put all the links in the description of this video. Thank you for listening. I hope it was informative, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the next episode coming up.